The grand lecture hall of the prestigious Galactic Academy hummed with a low, anticipatory thrum, a vibrant cacophony of 1,000 different languages and 100 different species. Students from across the cosmos, a breathtaking tapestry of alien life, were filing in for the highly anticipated xenobiology seminar. Among them, Era, a striking humanoid from the planet Azua, moved with an almost ethereal grace. Her skin, a breathtaking cerulean blue, shimmered subtly under the hall's soft lighting, and her hair, a cascade of iridescent strands, seemed to catch and refract the light, creating a dazzling spectacle of color. Her eyes, a piercing violet, held an intensity that belied her calm demeanor, hinting at the sharp intellect and unwavering curiosity that had brought her to this hallowed hall of learning. Even amidst the diverse and often bizarre assembly of alien scholars, Era's otherworldly beauty was undeniable, setting her apart from the crowd. She'd always possessed an insatiable curiosity, a deep-seated fascination with the myriad peculiarities of alien species, their unique adaptations, their bewildering customs, their often inexplicable behaviors. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever captivated her quite like humans. These strange, pinkish bipeds from a relatively insignificant backwater planet called Earth had only recently made contact with the wider galactic community, yet they were already causing significant ripples throughout the cosmos. Their rapid technological advancements were astonishing, their capacity for innovation seemingly boundless. Their scientific breakthroughs were nothing short of revolutionary, their engineering feats breathtakingly impressive. But it was their social dynamics, their unpredictable behaviors, their complex emotional landscape that truly fascinated, and at times, deeply perplexed, Era. As she took her seat, settling into the plush, ergonomically designed chair, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from a group of human male students several rows ahead. Their boisterous laughter and crude, often vulgar, jokes grated on her refined sensibilities. A wave of irritation, laced with a distinct undercurrent of confusion, washed over her. How could a species so seemingly primitive, so seemingly uncouth, have gained admission to this most prestigious institution of higher learning? The very notion seemed almost paradoxical, an unsettling contradiction that fueled her intense curiosity. The hall fell silent as Professor Rex, a wizened old reptilian whose ancient scales shimmered with an iridescent sheen, slithered to the podium. His forked tongue darted out, tasting the air, a ritualistic gesture that both intrigued and slightly unsettled Era. His voice, a dry, rasping whisper, echoed through the vast hall. "Greetings, students," he rasped, his words carrying a weight of centuries of accumulated knowledge. "Today, we shall delve into the fascinating, and often perplexing, subject of reproductive habits across various sentient species. We shall begin with a particularly unusual case study, humans." Era leaned forward eagerly, her pen poised over her notepad, a barely perceptible tremor in her hand betraying her intense anticipation. Finally, she would gain some insight into these enigmatic beings, these humans, whose biology and social dynamics were so unlike anything she had ever encountered before. "As you all know," Professor Rex continued, his voice a low purr that seemed to both soothe and unsettle, "most advanced species have evolved specific mating seasons or cycles. This carefully regulated process ensures efficient reproduction and maximizes the chances of species survival. It is a fundamental principle of evolutionary biology, a testament to the enduring power of natural selection. Humans, however, appear to defy this fundamental principle." He tapped a button on the podium, and a holographic image of a human male materialized in the air above the podium, slowly rotating, displaying a muscular physique that sent a blush creeping across Era's cerulean cheeks. It was so markedly different from the lithe, graceful males of her own species, a stark contrast that emphasized the profound differences between these two species. "Human males are unique in that they are essentially always fertile," Professor Rex explained, his voice a low, almost hypnotic purr. "They possess no defined mating season and are, to put it bluntly, constantly driven to seek out sexual partners. This insatiable libido, this seemingly unending drive for mating, is attributed to exceptionally high levels of testosterone and a correspondingly aggressive nature. A collective gasp rippled through the lecture hall, a palpable wave of surprise and disbelief that washed over Era. Always fertile. Constantly seeking mates. The very notion seemed biologically inefficient, almost counterintuitive. It challenged everything Era had learned in her years of dedicated study. A tentacled student, his voice a series of melodic clicks and whistles, interjected, "Professor, wouldn't such a constant mating drive be significantly detrimental to their species? How do they find time for anything else? How does their society function?" An excellent question, Professor Rex nodded, his forked tongue flicking out again, a gesture that seemed to punctuate his words. While it may appear counterintuitive, even paradoxical, this seemingly unrestrained mating drive has, in fact, been a significant factor in human success. Their aggressive, risk-taking behavior, often fueled by this intense drive, has allowed them to explore, innovate, and conquer at an astonishing rate. Their relentless pursuit of new experiences, new knowledge, new territories, has driven them to remarkable achievements. It is a complex equation, a delicate balance between seemingly contradictory forces. Era's mind reeled, struggling to reconcile this information with her preconceived notions, struggling to integrate this new information into her existing framework of understanding. She glanced at the human males again, seeing them in a completely new light, their behavior suddenly taking on a new significance. Their confidence, their swagger, was it all merely a manifestation of their perpetually heightened hormonal state? Their seemingly unrestrained energy, their boundless enthusiasm, were these merely outward expressions of their inherent, almost insatiable libido? As the lecture continued, Professor Rex delved into the intricate complexities of human mating rituals and courtship behaviors, detailing their surprising diversity and often unpredictable nature. Era dutifully took notes, her pen scribbling furiously across her notepad, but a growing unease settled in her stomach. The more she learned about human males, the more she felt a strange dichotomy, repulsed yet strangely drawn to them, intrigued and unsettled in equal measure. When the seminar finally concluded, Era gathered her belongings, hurrying out of the lecture hall, eager to escape the suffocating weight of the information she'd just absorbed. She needed time to process it all, to reconcile these new and unsettling facts with her existing understanding of evolutionary biology and social dynamics. But as she stepped into the crowded corridor, she found herself unexpectedly face to face with one of the human males from earlier, the one whose boisterous laughter and crude jokes had initially irritated her. Up close, he was even more imposing than she'd realized, his physical presence commanding and undeniably magnetic. He towered over her, his broad shoulders and chiseled jawline radiating an aura of raw, primal masculinity that both intrigued and slightly unsettled her. Era's heart pounded in her chest as he flashed her a cocky grin, a confident smile that seemed to both challenge and invite. "Hey there, Blue," he said, his deep voice sending a shiver down her spine. His voice was rich and resonant, a sound that seemed to vibrate within her very core. "Name's Clark. Couldn't help but notice you staring at me during the lecture. Like what you see?" Era's cheeks flushed a deep indigo, the color of a twilight sky. I wasn't staring," she stammered, desperately trying to regain her composure, to appear unaffected by his presence. "I was just taking notes." Clark chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. "Sure you were, sweetheart," he said, leaning in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Well, if you ever want a more hands-on lesson in human anatomy, you know where to find me." He winked, a playful, almost challenging gesture, and then, with a casual swagger, he sauntered off down the hall, leaving Era breathless and utterly discombobulated. Back in her dorm room, Era's mind churned with conflicting emotions. She had always prided herself on her logical, scientific approach to life, her unwavering dedication to reason and objective observation. Yet, something about those human males, particularly Clark, had awakened a primal, irrational side of her that she didn't quite understand, a side that challenged her carefully constructed worldview. She flopped down on her bed, the plush material sinking beneath her weight, and stared up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all, to reconcile the seemingly contradictory emotions swirling within her. She knew, intellectually, that she should stay far away from creatures as volatile and unpredictable as humans, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that her journey of discovery was only just beginning, that her fascination with these enigmatic beings was far from over. Little did Era know, her unexpected encounter with Clark, her intense curiosity about human males, would soon lead her down a path of forbidden desire, interstellar intrigue, and the ultimate question of what it truly means to be human. For in the depths of space, where species collide and passions ignite, anything is possible, even love between a blue-skinned alien and a red-blooded human male. As Era drifted off to sleep that night, her dreams were haunted by visions of chiseled jaws, cocky grins, and the promise of an adventure unlike any she had ever known. The universe, it seemed, had plans for her, plans that would test the very limits of her mind, body, and soul. But for now, she could only wonder and wait, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and exhilaration at the thought of what lay ahead. For in the game of interspecies romance, there could be no winners or losers, only those brave enough to take the leap into the unknown and embrace the infinite possibilities of the cosmos. And so, with a final sigh of resignation, Era surrendered to the sweet oblivion of sleep, knowing that when she awoke, her life would never be the same again. The human males had arrived at the Galactic Academy, and nothing would ever be quite the same, least of all her own untamed heart. The following weeks were a blur of lectures, lab work, and furtive, stolen glances across crowded hallways. Era tried her best to focus on her studies, to immerse herself in the intricate complexities of xenobiology, but her mind kept drifting back to Clark, to his cocky grin, to the intensity of his gaze, to the electric thrill that had coursed through her at his touch. She couldn't explain the hold he seemed to have over her, the inexplicable pull she felt towards him. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced before, a feeling that defied logic and reason. One evening, as Era was leaving the library after a particularly long and grueling study session, she found herself face to face with Clark once again. He was leaning against a wall, his arms crossed over his broad chest, an air of casual confidence radiating from him. He looked, to Era, like he owned the very place, like he was the master of his own destiny. "Hey there, Blue," he said, his voice low and seductive, a murmur that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly within her soul. "Fancy running into you here." Era felt her heart skip a beat, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you want, Clark?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, to maintain the composure she desperately craved. He pushed off from the wall and took a step toward her, his eyes smoldering with barely contained desire, his gaze intense and unwavering. "I think you know exactly what I want, Era," he murmured, his voice a husky whisper that sent shivers down her spine. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, the touch sending a jolt of electricity coursing through her veins. Era shivered, her skin tingling where his fingers had grazed her cheek. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, backing away slightly, her attempt at self-preservation faltering in the face of his overwhelming presence. Clark chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. "Don't play coy with me, sweetheart," he said, moving closer still, his approach deliberate, purposeful. "I've seen the way you look at me. You're curious about humans, about our mating habits." Era's eyes widened in shock. "How did you?" "I have my ways," Clark grinned, tapping the side of his nose conspiratorially. "Let's just say I'm very good at reading people, especially beautiful alien women who can't keep their eyes off me." Era felt her cheeks flush hot with embarrassment, a wave of heat rising from her chest to her face, but beneath that embarrassment, something else stirred, something primal and urgent that she didn't quite understand. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Clark," she said, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation, to assert her independence. "But I'm not interested." Clark's grin only widened at her words, his expression a mixture of amusement and challenge. "Oh, I think you are, Blue," he said, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "I think you're very interested, and I'm going to prove it to you." Before Era could react, before she could even formulate a proper response, Clark had closed the distance between them and captured her lips in a searing kiss. His mouth was hot and demanding against hers, his tongue probing insistently at the seam of her lips until she opened for him with a gasp, her resistance melting away in the face of his overwhelming passion. Era's mind went blank, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling before the onslaught of his desire. Clark's hands roamed over her body, his touch igniting fires in places she didn't even know existed. She knew she should push him away, tell him to stop, but her body had other ideas. It was as if he had awakened some primal, animalistic side of her that she had never known existed, a side that defied reason and logic, a side that craved his touch, his attention, his desire. When Clark finally pulled away, Era was left breathless and trembling, her knees weak and her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He grinned down at her, his eyes glittering with triumph, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and undeniable amusement. "See," he said, his voice rough with desire. "I told you were interested." Era opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. She couldn't deny the effect he had on her, the way her body responded to his touch, the way her mind went fuzzy with want whenever he was near. Clark leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "Meet me at the observatory tonight," he whispered. "Midnight. I'll show you things you've never even dreamed of." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Era standing there in the hallway, her mind reeling and her body aching for his touch. She knew, intellectually, that she should stay away, that getting involved with a human male could only lead to trouble, to complications she wasn't prepared to handle, yet the temptation was too great to resist. The pull towards him was undeniable, a force that transcended logic and reason, a force that she couldn't, and wouldn't, deny. As the hours ticked by, Era tried to distract herself with studying and socializing with her alien friends, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Clark and his promise of forbidden pleasures. The anticipation gnawed at her, a constant, persistent hum beneath the surface of her consciousness. By the time midnight rolled around, she was a bundle of nerves and exhilarated anticipation, a mixture of excitement and apprehension that sent shivers down her spine. Sneaking out of her dorm room, Era made her way to the observatory, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. When she arrived, she found Clark waiting for her, his tall frame silhouetted against the starry sky, his presence both comforting and intimidating. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice low and seductive, a murmur that seemed to caress her very soul. Era swallowed hard, trying to calm the butterflies fluttering in her stomach, trying to quell the storm of emotions raging within her. I don't know what I'm doing here," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, her words betraying her inner turmoil. Clark closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his movements fluid and powerful, his presence both commanding and strangely comforting. His hands came up to cup her face, his fingers tracing the delicate contours of her jawline. "Yes, you do," he murmured, his thumb brushing over her lower lip, his touch sending a wave of heat through her veins. "You're here because you want to be. Because you want to know what it's like to be with a human male." Era's breath caught in her throat as Clark's lips descended on hers once more, his kiss even more passionate and demanding than before. She melted into his embrace, her body molding itself to his as if it had been made for him, as if their union was inevitable, predestined. As Clark's hands roamed over her curves, exploring every inch of her skin, Era let out a soft moan of pleasure. She had never felt anything like this before, the heat, the urgency, the sheer overwhelming need that consumed her, the primal intensity of their connection. Clark's lips trailed down her neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin there and sending shivers of pure delight down her spine. "Do you want me, Era?" he whispered, his voice rough with desire, his words a direct and undeniable invitation. "Yes," she breathed, her hands fisting in his hair, her voice barely a whisper, a testament to the overwhelming power of her desire. "Gods, yes." And with that, Era surrendered herself to the passion and the pleasure, letting Clark take her to heights she had never known existed, to a level of intimacy and intensity she had never imagined possible. Under the watchful gaze of the stars, they came together in a tangle of limbs, gasps, and moans, their bodies moving in perfect synchronicity as they chased their mutual release. When it was over, Era lay in Clark's arms, her body sated and her mind spinning with the implications of what they had just done. She knew there would be consequences, that their forbidden tryst could never be anything more than a fleeting moment of passion, a stolen night under the stars, yet as Clark held her close and whispered sweet nothings in her ear, Era couldn't bring herself to care. For now, she was content to bask in the afterglow of their lovemaking, to revel in the feeling of being desired and cherished by a human male, to savor the intensity of their connection. Little did she know, their night of passion was only the beginning, the spark that would ignite a fire that would consume them both, body and soul. For in the game of love and war, there could be no winners or losers, only those brave enough to risk everything for a chance at something truly extraordinary. And so, as the stars twinkled overhead and the universe spun on its relentless course, Era and Clark clung to each other, lost in a moment of perfect, fleeting bliss, a shared intimacy that transcended the boundaries of species and culture. The future was uncertain, shrouded in the mystery of the unknown, but one thing was clear, they had started something that could never be undone, and the consequences, both profound and far-reaching, would be felt across the galaxy for years to come. The days that followed their passionate encounter were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Era. She found herself consumed with thoughts of Clark, haunted by the memory of his touch, his kisses, the overwhelming intensity of their connection. She knew she should focus on her studies, on the rigorous demands of the Galactic Academy, but her mind kept drifting back to that night in the observatory, to the feel of Clark's hands on her body, to the way he had made her feel, desired, cherished, completely and utterly seen. Her carefully constructed world, built on logic and reason, was irrevocably altered, forever changed by her encounter with a human male. Finally unable to contain her curiosity, her need to understand this strange and compelling attraction any longer, Era sought out Clark after class one day. She found him lounging on the quad, his long legs stretched out in front of him as he basked in the warm sunlight, an air of casual confidence radiating from him. "Clark," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she approached him, her carefully constructed composure faltering in the face of her overwhelming emotions. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up at her, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he grinned, a playful, almost mischievous expression that both intrigued and unsettled her. "Of course, Blue," he said, patting the grass beside him. "Have a seat." Era hesitated for a moment before lowering herself to the ground next to him, her heart pounding in her chest, her apprehension palpable. "I've been thinking a lot about what we learned in xenobiology class," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, to maintain the composure she so desperately craved. "About human male physiology." Clark's grin widened, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Oh, have you now?" he teased, leaning in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "And what exactly have you been thinking about, sweetheart?" Era felt her cheeks flush hot at his proximity, the warmth spreading through her body, yet she forced herself to press on, to maintain the focus she desperately needed. "Well, I was wondering, is it true that human males are always fertile? That they have no mating season?" Clark chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. "It's true," he murmured, his voice low and seductive. "We're always ready and willing, Blue. Anytime, anywhere." Era shivered at his words, her body responding instinctively to his nearness, a primal reaction that she couldn't, and wouldn't, deny. But how is that possible?" she asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Doesn't it get exhausting, constantly seeking out mates?" Clark shrugged, his fingers playing idly with a strand of her hair, his touch sending a wave of heat through her veins. "It's just the way we're wired, I guess," he said. "We have a lot of testosterone pumping through our veins, and it drives us to pursue women pretty much constantly." Era nodded slowly, trying to process this information, to reconcile it with her own understanding of biology and reproduction. "And what about refractory periods?" she asked, her scientific curiosity getting the better of her. How long does it take for a human male to recover after mating? Clark's grin turned wicked, his eyes darkening with desire, his expression both playful and intensely alluring. Not long at all, sweetheart, he murmured, his hand sliding up her thigh, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her body. In fact, I could show you right now, if you'd like. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against her ear. Don't tell me you've already forgotten our last time together, Blue. I seem to recall demonstrating my recovery abilities quite thoroughly. Era felt her cheeks flush at the memory, her body responding instinctively to his touch, the memory of his touch igniting a fire within her. I haven't forgotten, she murmured, her voice breathy. But I thought perhaps that was an anomaly, a fluke of human physiology. Clark chuckled, his fingers tracing maddening patterns on her skin. It was no fluke, sweetheart. That's just standard operating procedure for us human males. His grin turned devilish. But if you need a refresher course, I'm more than happy to oblige, in the name of scientific research, of course. Era's breath caught in her throat, her body tingling with anticipation, but she forced herself to stay focused, to remember why she had sought him out in the first place. Clark, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm serious. I really want to understand how human males work. Clark's expression softened, his hand stilling on her leg, his touch both playful and intensely intimate. I know you are, Blue, he said, his voice gentle and understanding. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have. But you have to understand, for us, sex isn't just a biological function. It's a way of connecting with someone, of expressing our desires and emotions. Era nodded, her heart fluttering in her chest, a mixture of excitement and apprehension washing over her. I think I'm starting to understand that, she said softly. But it's all so new to me. My species doesn't experience attraction the same way humans do. Clark smiled, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin, a gesture that spoke volumes of his affection for her. Then let me show you, he murmured, leaning in to capture her lips in a soft, tender kiss, a kiss that was both intimate and profoundly meaningful. Era melted into his embrace, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair as she kissed him back, her response both passionate and heartfelt. She could feel something shifting between them, a new level of intimacy and understanding that went beyond mere physical attraction, a connection that transcended the boundaries of their different species. When they finally broke apart, Era was breathless and flushed, her heart racing in her chest, her emotions a swirling vortex of desire, confusion, and a burgeoning sense of hope. Clark, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I think I'm starting to have feelings for you. Clark's eyes widened in surprise, his expression softening into something tender and vulnerable, a vulnerability that both captivated and intrigued Era. I think I'm starting to have feelings for you too, Blue, he said softly, his hand cupping her cheek, his touch both gentle and reassuring. But we have to be careful. Whatever this is between us, it's not going to be easy. Era nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears, her voice trembling slightly. I know, she said. But I'm willing to try, if you are. Clark smiled, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. I'm definitely willing, he murmured, leaning in to kiss her again, a kiss that was both tender and deeply passionate. And so, under the warm sun and the watchful eyes of the universe, Era and Clark embarked on a new chapter in their relationship, one filled with tender moments, heated encounters, and a deepening emotional connection that neither of them had ever experienced before. It wouldn't be easy, navigating the complexities of interspecies romance in a galaxy that was often hostile to such unions, but as they held each other close and whispered sweet nothings in each other's ears, Era and Clark knew that they were willing to face any challenge, to overcome any obstacle, for the chance to be together. For in the end, love was the most powerful force in the universe, a force that could bridge any divide, heal any wound, and light the way through even the darkest of nights. And as long as they had each other, Era and Clark knew that they could face anything the cosmos threw their way. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but they would face them together, their love a shield against the darkness, a beacon of hope in the vast expanse of the cosmos.